Welcome, everybody. If we haven't met, my name is Shannon Watson. I'm the Executive Director of Majority in the Middle. If this is your first introduction to our group, welcome. Majority in the Middle is giving those in the middle a place to gather outside the back and forth and elevating voices of people who are modeling the behavior that we want to see. And we're also working on ways to bring a little more civility and a little less partisanship to our politics. As I mentioned before, I have literally been waiting years to host this conversation with these two panelists. And so I am super excited. I'm so happy to have our friend Al serving as the moderator today. Al Travis has been the owner and president of Innovative Marketing Techniques for almost 30 years. The company specializes in marketing plans for small and mid-sized companies. Al also hosts Between the Lines, which is a cable cast political program seen throughout the state, and The Al Travis Show, a 3-hour talk radio show every weekday covering news, sports, politics, and fun topics all about Minnesota. The show is heard on stations in Faribault, St. Cloud, Bemidji, Buffalo, New Ulm, and counting. Al, good to see you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me, and I really do mean that, Shannon. I met Shannon roughly maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago via Senator Kent, and absolutely love the premise of Majority in the Middle, and we've had her on the program a couple of times. I love this program. I love the idea of having these two people together. I'll start with former Senator Susan Kent, an experienced leader, dedicated advocate, former small business owner, a concerned community member. She has more than 20 years of professional experience in strategic marketing and media, ranging from major corporations and government to small business, tourism, hospitality, and local arts and nonprofit organizations. Susan has spent 10 years representing Woodbury in Minnesota Senate, and in 2020, she was elected as Senate Minority Leader, becoming the very first woman to lead the Senate DFL caucus. On the other side of the fence, we've got Senator Jeremy Miller. He is a fourth-generation chief financial officer of William Miller Scrap Iron and Metal Company, a family-owned and operated business that dates back to 1910. His responsibilities include accounting, business development, marketing, human resources, domestic global sales. He also serves on the Maury Miller Athletic Foundation, the Winona State University Warrior Club Board, St. Mary's University Athletic Advisory Board, the Minnesota State College Southeast Technical Presidential Advisory Board, a member of the Winona Area Chamber of Commerce. Senator Miller is the first elected in 2010 and has held jobs as Majority Leader and Senate President during this time in office. Holy Hannah. Busy folks, and we've got them here, and I'm very happy to have them here. Okay, so with questions, if you're just joining us, Shannon mentioned earlier, I do have a list of some questions to make sure we're rolling along, but if you have a question, please raise your hand, and you can ask it because we are in the mode that lets you do that. But we'll start first with Jeremy. You're one of the founding co-chairs of the Purple Caucus, and I believe that was back in 2013. Can you tell us how that group came about to begin with?
Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. I'm coming from you here today from Los Angeles, California. I'm at LAX airport. I did finally find one of these soundproof booths. I'm traveling for work, visiting with customers out here, and I had committed to Shannon and the rest of the group that I would do this, and then this business trip came up, and I tried to figure out a way to juggle everything, and here I am from the airport making it all work. The story of our lives. Everyone lives a busy life. Al, thanks for the question. Yeah, so how the Purple Caucus started back in 2013, I remember it like it was yesterday. Former state senator, now mayor-elect, Roger Reinert and I were sitting together in a transportation committee meeting, and there was a partisan battle. I don't remember what the partisan battle was, but Republicans were arguing for one thing and Democrats were arguing for another, and we weren't making any progress in the committee hearing. And Roger and I were sitting next to each other in that hearing, and I remember we both leaned back and we looked at each other and we said, there has got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better way to at least have a adult conversation about the issues that we're dealing with here in the legislature. Very, very important issues. And what that led to was Roger and I, along with several others, forming the Purple Caucus back in 2013. And really what the idea of the Purple Caucus was to bring together Democrats and Republicans in the Senate just to get to know each other, to build relationships. I've learned certainly from my father in business, and it's equally, if not more important, in politics and everyday life, the importance of building relationships. And one of the things that I noticed at the time, I'd been in the Senate for, I don't know, 3 years at this point now. And one of the things I learned is there are very few opportunities to get to know each other as members of the Senate in your own party, let alone across the aisle in the other party. Our schedules are so busy. We have committee hearings, we have floor sessions, we have constituent meetings, we have meetings in the evening, we have phone calls and emails that we have to get to, and there's really not a dedicated time to set aside just to get to know each other. So first and foremost, the main priority of the Purple Caucus was to bring together Republicans and Democrats, no staff, no lobbyists, no outside folks, just members of the Senate on both sides of the aisle to get to know each other, build those relationships, and learn about what issues were important to folks in their districts. And what we found through the Purple Caucus was there was actually a lot more in common, and there was a lot more areas of agreement than there were areas of a disagreement. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to the media or the discussions in committee hearings or on the floor, there's so much more of a focus on the areas of disagreement, but there truly are a lot more areas of agreement, and that's what we found through the Purple Caucus.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Kent, so when did you hear about this? What drew you to it, and when did you join the Purple Caucus?
So my first session started in January 2013, and we had just retaken the majority and as the DFLers, and Roger Reinert, brought this to our caucus and invited us to participate. And in my case, I represented, as Jeremy probably remembers, one of the swingiest districts at the time. It was very kind of right down the middle at the time, and it has gotten more progressive in the meantime. But I thought this was great. First of all, it was a great opportunity, as he was saying, to get to know people, particularly people across the aisle. I was trying to get to know everybody at that point. And I knew from the people in my community, from knocking on a gazillion doors in 2012, that this was exactly what they were looking for. They were really frustrated with the back and forth and the tit for tat and the bickering, and so I was like, hey, this is a way to demonstrate that I'm going to try to actually walk the talk. And so it was great, and I have really fond memories of the meetings and the conversations that we all had.
When you say you're from the swingiest district, which I'm going to coin that phrase with you, I promise, the swingiest district. Let me ask you this: when you joined, was there anything in particular that you remember that was like, either way, that's everything I'd hoped it'd been? Or was there the other side of the fence said, well, I didn't think I'd get that kind of reaction? How did it actually work when you found yourself going to those meetings?
It was just getting to know folks. I mean, we all do spend a bunch of time around each other, whether it's in committee hearings or on the floor, interminable hours. And that was a funny session because we got off to a fast start because that was the year that MNsure got started. And so, to sit in a smaller meeting that was not structured, that was, we're just going to have a conversation and exchange ideas. It was just a really good opportunity. And, there were a number of things that you think about. Like, I remember when I was on the Transportation Committee, I sat next to David Senjum forever, and it was wonderful. I felt so lucky as a complete newbie to be able to sit next to someone who's a great guy and, knows so much. And, so those are the opportunities you really try to take advantage of.
No backlash on that, though? And I'm coming to you, Jeremy, Mr. Miller. No backlash on that. You go from, now this is 2013, so politics are a lot different now in 2023. But you didn't get backlash on that and said, what are you doing with those guys? Why are you hanging with Senjum? I mean, let's be honest, in that Miller character, really? None of that was ever said?
I never got pushback for working with Republicans. And again, I live next to Republicans. I live 2 doors down from a guy who's really conservative and ran for the House last cycle. He's my friend.
That's why you put up that fence, right? I'm sorry.
He put up the fence, actually. But that is life in Woodbury. We all work together, hang out together, golf together, go get a pub and a beer and O'Malley's together, you know.
Senator Miller, same question to you. So you start this thing up, you think we got something going on here, this is going to be great. Did it go over as well as you had hoped? Did you get some flack that you didn't see coming? Give us an idea in 2013 how that was received on your side.
Well, one of the things I learned early in my legislative career is no matter what you do, you can't please everybody. And there were some issues that I worked on. There were some farming and agriculture issues that I thought were a slam dunk. I worked on some synthetic drug issues early in my legislative career that I thought were slam dunk. There's no way anyone's going to be opposed to this. Well, you always find opposition regardless of what issue you're working on, or regardless of, even if you think, oh, this is a no-brainer, there's always folks that are going to push back. And that was, for me, my experience with the Purple Caucus. I had some folks that push back on the right, oh, he's not conservative enough, or on the left, oh, he's just putting on a show, trying to show people that he's more in the middle or more purple, but really he's not. So I got a little bit of pushback from the fringe on both sides, but my philosophy is always listen and work together with folks, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, to try to do good things for the people we represent and the people across the state of Minnesota. So, yeah, there was some pushback, but I always try to stay above the fray and try to do what's best for the people that I represent all across the state.
I think everybody on the list here, everybody who's listening along, wants to know some of the skinny here, though. I love that you guys are putting this out here like this. But were you going there, Senator Miller, with the express, when you guys would get together, the idea that stay away from these three shiny objects that will blow the room up, and let's just talk about, the farm thing. They got to go with the farm thing. Was that how this worked? And I'll get back with you, Senator Kent, as well, how you went into the meeting. But you went there with the mayor of Duluth now. Was that how you went? Let's only bring up the soft stuff?
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it was the soft stuff. I think we tackled some very important and very critical issues, whether it was related to funding for transportation or funding for education. Did we tackle the social issues? No. We didn't discuss highly controversial social issues that you're not going to change people's mind on. But that wasn't the focus of the Purple Caucus. It wasn't to jeopardize principles or give up on things that you really believe in. It was, where can we find common ground to get good things done on the issues that we're discussing here in the legislature? So, no, we didn't go in talking on highly controversial social issues, but we did tackle, I think, some pretty critical issues that we're facing the state of Minnesota, and again, found a lot of areas of agreement on those issues.
Senator Kent, you're not the leadership of this thing. You didn't start it up. You were, I'm going to somehow asked to join. And maybe I should start there. Were you asked to join this? Were you told what it was about? And then you asked, could I join? When did they give you the secret handshake that let you into the room with these people? How did you fit in with them?
So my recollection of that is that it was not some, someone taps you on the shoulder in the corner of the retiring room and says, hey, psst, we got this secret gig going. No, Roger came to the caucus and said, hey, we're doing this. Anybody who feels like this is a good fit, come be a part of it. And I was glad for the opportunity to do it. This was always above board. This wasn't some underhanded thing that we were doing to try to trick leadership or anything. And it really was, just like Jeremy said, and that's the way it was always presented at the meetings I attended and with Senator Reinert. Where can we find common ground so that we can make progress? And that was the basic deal, and that's where we sort of focused all the questions and conversations.
All right, but let's be honest, between you and I, just you and I, you go there and it's going to be all nice and warm and fuzzy. You probably made cookies for all I know. I have no idea. But in somewhere in the back of your head, like, okay, I can wing this one off and bring him to the dark side, right? I mean, you're almost like a Lord Sith from the Star Wars, right? You could go get that one and bring him over. That was the ultimate plan of the Purple Party, right, Susan? Senator Kent?
See, this is the problem with, we're all a bunch of normal, very busy people in the legislature. We have kids, we have bills to pay, we have houses that aren't getting cleaned fast enough.
Fair enough.
it's just this was the thing that was such a good deal about it. It was just a generally good faith effort. I will say, and Jeremy, I'm not going to name any names, you'll appreciate it, but I forget what the thing was. We were working on something, and I was over in some meeting at the SOB, where the house hangs out, and we had come out of a Purple Caucus meeting, and I ran into one of the Republican members, and I was like, "Hey, we just had this Purple Caucus thing. It's about this. You should come in." And this member said, "Oh, I would be crucified at home if I participated with the Purple Caucus." People just made the decisions based on the districts they represented, and try. It was an opportunity to get to know each other and build those relationships, and try to make the system work. Because ultimately, and Al, I think you've heard me pontificate about this. Ultimately, this whole system of a legislature is 201 Minnesotans coming from very different parts of the state with very different communities, people we represent, and our own personal stories and experiences and perspectives and backgrounds. That is an amazing opportunity to bring all that together in one place, working on behalf of the people of Minnesota. But you kind of got to get to know each other and work through, misunderstandings or places where you're not hearing each other or whatever it is. And this was one really great avenue to do that.
Senator Miller, on your side of the fence, did you have folks either come up to you and say, "Man, love what you're doing, love to be there, that'd be great, but, you look at my constituents, that's not going to fly"? And on their end, they're saying, did you get the same thing as the Senator Kent was getting, that there are just some people who couldn't play even if they wanted to?
Yeah, every district is a little different. Everyone's constituencies are a little bit different. And, my biggest frustration in politics is the polarization of politics. And it seems to have gotten worse every year that I've been in the legislature. And now it's really, really bad. And oftentimes it feels like there's more of a focus on pointing the finger and making the other side look bad than there is actually trying to work together and find solutions to get things done. And part of that is, in some districts on both sides of the aisle, it's not necessarily Republican versus Democrat. It could be Democrat versus Democrat or Republican versus Republican. A lot of members were concerned about a primary or endorsing challenge. And when you come from districts like Susan Kent does, or like I do, where they're, just more purple districts, you hear from folks on both sides of the aisle, and the number one frustration people had is, or the number one question people had is, why can't you guys just work together? And that was the whole idea of the Purple Caucus, is to try to put that polarization to the side and work together toward good solutions for the state of Minnesota. And I'll tell you, Al, there were concerns within the leadership circles, and this was long before I got into any leadership circles, but there were concerns in both caucuses from leadership. Oh, you can't go to this, or you can't go to this. Or we even heard that some leadership in both sides were sending spies to the Purple Caucus. Oh, go there and see what they're talking about. Well, we weren't trying to hide anything. We're just trying to find good solutions for the people of Minnesota.
The one that brought the cookies. I brought that up earlier. We won't go any further. We'll talk more as a Purple Caucus and where we think it goes in today's society. I got some questions from the audience. We want to get them out there. Paul asks, "We have just had school board and other local elections. How do you each view local elections and their relative influence on statewide politics, and vice versa?" Start with you, Senator Kent.
Well, and you and I talked a little bit about this morning on the radio, Al, since we had those elections last night. It is really unfortunate. I think it is getting more polarized and partisan at the local level. These are nonpartisan races. Nobody has an R or a D or an I or whatever next to their name on a ballot. But, for example, in my community, and this is the second school board cycle, we have a slate of candidates, and they put their signs up, there are 3 or 4 signs together, and they're all red. And, they are making a very clear partisan political statement as they're running for that nonpartisan office. And that's unfortunate. I think I know around the majority in the middle community, we often talk about local government being nonpartisan because potholes are nonpartisan.
Yeah.
And so I hope we can, I hope the cat's not out of the bag on that one. I hope we can get back to more nonpartisanship in these important local units of government, because they're closest to the ground with all the citizens that we all represent.
Senator Miller, local elections, how does that affect statewide and vice versa?
Well, all politics are local, right? So the more local the race, the more connected those folks are with people in the community. And I'll just say that it is disappointing that these local races are becoming more partisan on both sides of the aisle. I mean, you have special interest groups that are now getting involved in local races, which doesn't always make the best outcome for the people that they're running for. So school board, right? It should be all about the kids. What is best for the kids? What can we do to provide as many opportunities for kids to be successful in the classroom and out? That's what the focus should be on, but it's become very, very political, and there are different opinions on how you provide those best opportunities for those kids. But that should be the number one question when it comes to school board, is what can we do that provides the best outcomes for the students? And there are different opinions on that, but it's concerning. It's certainly disappointing, but even more so, it's concerning to see these local races become more and more political and more partisan.
Sidebar, isn't it weird that we're now paying money for school board elections? People are spending their money to get elected into the school boards. I mean, down here where I live, if you had a flyer that you made up in your own office off your own, fax machine, that was what you put out. And now we have people literally getting behind people raising money to go run for school board. It's gotten a little weird. Let me ask you this. Next question from the audience member. Senator Miller, as a member of the tax committee, was the no 5 authors from the same party rule that the chair made, did it actually make a difference of any kind? And maybe you can explain a little more in depth what that whole thing was about to begin with.
So Senator Rest, to her credit, in the Senate Tax Committee, wanted to bring up bills in the committee that had bipartisan support. And I think that was great. Unfortunately, when we saw the bill at the end of the day, after it went through the conference committee, and then like every other year, the meetings, the last day or two of session, the final product was not a bipartisan product and had several provisions in there that Republicans did not support. So I think very well intended, and I appreciate her having that sort of that model or that philosophy as we went through committee. On the flip side, the reason why sometimes that doesn't work is then we had provisions in that tax bill that the Senate had not had any discussion or any testimony on, and they sort of came up at the last minute on the last day, and we were all kind of in the dark because we didn't hear those proposals in the Senate.
Senator, get your thought on the tax committee. No 5 authors on the same party on a bill.
I remember when that got announced, and it got a lot of pushback from the left because the actual policy was that you could have 4 Democrats if you left a blank space, right? So potentially you're still looking for a co-author of the other side. The theory was, the concern was that basically it just allowed Republicans to veto even getting a bill heard if they wouldn't participate. Anyway, so it gets in the weeds, but I thought it was funny that the initial reaction from the left was really negative. But I appreciate Jeremy's observations about the fact that did hold up getting some bills heard. That obviously we're getting hearings in the House. That is a classic example of unintended consequences in the legislature. You think you're doing something helpful, and it ends up causing some wrinkles.
But when you start making rules about civility, isn't it weird? I mean, it's kind of like, yes, we're going to do this because we have to have a rule that all 5 of us. If the Purple Caucus worked the way the Purple Caucus should, all those coming out should be looking for that anyway, right? You should be coming out looking for the other side. We got to make a rule to banish it from not happening. You know what I'm saying? It seems you're going to make a rule against the way people just acted. I'm finding it hard to believe.
Al, this is one of those things where you think is common sense. The state has a $20 billion budget surplus. Who in their right mind would think that you need to raise more taxes?
Now we're going to go down a road on this.
I don't want to get into it right now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, okay. Another question.
$20 billion surplus.
Yeah. In some way, it's going to get to this. The power of listening. How can people argue about that? The idea that we would hear the other side, back to the tax committee, and it's like, wait a minute, we've all been sitting here, we went through all this, no one seems to be listening to us. How does the power of listening and how do we get people to do that for this majority in the middle?
You know,
Senator
one of
Kent.
the things that I've observed, because I would get this pushback sometimes from constituents, and they would say, "Oh, you're not listening to me," when what they really meant was, "You don't agree with me. You're not going to do what I'm
You're
telling
not
you."
taking my side, so you're not listening, obviously.
Right. And so, you know, I think that's kind of an interesting angle here, you know. But you know,
That is so funny.
I do not understand myself. It's like we should always be able to have a conversation. And I would say that, you know, I give Jeremy all credit as a leader, as the Senate president, and as a colleague throughout. And, you know, it's like he's always been one of those people who was known as someone you could have a conversation with and talk to. It's like, it doesn't mean you're going to agree on everything, of course, because that's not human nature. But, you know, there needs to be more of that. And I will say, and this is a place where I think, and I can say this now as a no longer elected official, we in the public have to encourage that. We have to reward that. You know, I mean, there's too much incentive in our entire system for bomb throwing tweets and you know, outrageous press conferences and floor speeches and all that stuff. And there and the, you know, as we sit here as at an event for Majority in the Middle, the folks in the middle just watch it go by and say, I don't want any part of this, when what we need to do is reward those who are working together, reaching compromise, and getting things done for our state and for the communities we represent.
Let me ask you this, Jeremy, Mr. Miller, Senator Miller. When you started the Purple Caucus and you were getting together, was there listening going on in those meetings? And then here's the Dr. Phil question for you. Was it because people that joined that were willing to listen? That's who they are as people. They're not my way or the highway. Or was there generally people who you thought, oh, he's never going to go along with me on this, would sit down and at least sit and listen to all the arguments? How was it when the Purple Caucus was there as far as listening to each other?
I think within the Purple Caucus, it was really, really good, and I think that's why people were there. There, whether it was in Susan's caucus or my caucus or in the House or wherever it is, you're always going to find folks that it's my way or the highway, my way or no way at all. And I think those folks kind of develop that reputation of yeah, you can go to this person, but they're not really going to listen. They might hear what you're saying, but they're not really going to listen to what you're saying. And I think one of the most important qualities of a business person or a public official, or regardless of what you do, one of the most important qualities we can have is to listen. And I always tell folks, I'll tell this group, I don't have all the answers. And I always tell folks, I'm not the smartest person in the room. Even when I'm the only person in the room, it's somewhat questionable who the smartest person in the room is. But it is so important to listen to folks because we don't know what we don't know. And we all have our sort of our areas of expertise, but we deal with so many issues in the legislature that we couldn't possibly know everything about every issue. Now we have colleagues that may think they know everything about every issue, but the reality is we don't. And the only way we're going to learn, or the only way we're going to get better outcomes, is if we are willing to listen to each other and then ultimately work together to try to find those positive solutions.
Yeah, that's why God invented the radio announcer, by the way. They do know everything about everything and can discuss it and tell you they're right. So we got that.
You're one of the few, Al. One of the few.
Well, I know it's a burden as much as anything else. Let's go to the next question. We heard from each of you that it is unfortunate that political discourse has become even more partisan across the state. What responsibility does the general electorate have? Ooh, I like that. Is it just outside special interest, or do we as voters have a share of that blame as well? Ooh, Paul, nice question. Way to turn it around. I like this. Your thoughts, Senator Kent?
Well, yeah, that's exactly what I was alluding to. I mean, we have to figure out as a society, you know, I always tell the story that 2013 session, which was my first session, and again, the DFL was in the majority, and I was on the education committees and transportation. And I spent so much of my time doing that. But if you'll recall, that was also right after the marriage amendment had failed at the ballot in November. And then later in that session, we did pass marriage equality. without going into the details of it, that really didn't do much in the legislature for the first few months of that session. I spent all my time, in committee hearings and constituent meetings and all this other sort of stuff. I spent almost no time working on the issue of same-sex marriage. But if you read the media, and this is why I remember it so clearly, if you read the news, that's what the reporters wanted to talk about. When's it going to happen? We're waiting for this. This is the story. Da, 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 da. And as if that was the only thing. And so when I would talk to constituents at town halls or individually, they all thought that's all I was spending my time on. I'm like, wait a minute, no, I'm trying to get all day kindergarten here,
Yeah.
And so, I think the media really loves to find the catnip. They're really quick when they sense a controversy or something going on. The other thing I worked on was Sunday sales, and Jeremy and I worked on that one a bit together. And part of the reason I got really into that one was let's get it over with, because it took up so much of the oxygen in the Capitol, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. And so let's just get it done, and then we can hopefully focus on some other stuff. So we need more people and the media to care about how this works and the other sort of bigger issues that matter to us.
Okay, Senator Miller, I'm going to just jump on Senator Kent here for just a second. She blames the media for wanting that catnip, I believe is the word she said. But it's the media who wants very much to give the audience, the Al Travises of the world, what we want, or at least what they believe we want, what makes us watch more television or read more papers. So I know we always want to blame the media. I get that. But the point is they're just trying to give me what I want because they think, if it bleeds, it leads, I'll read that. Is it the papers, is it the media, or is it the rest of us out here that are dying for that information and they're giving us what we want? Your thought, and on your side, which you're going to say the media treats you terrible anyway, so you're in Minnesota. Is that it? They're giving us what we want and that bothers Senator Kent?
So I agree with Susan on this, that the media tends to focus on the controversy or the areas of disagreement, which makes it more difficult for everyone. And people's lives are so busy, and they I don't want to say they're uninformed, but they are not informed as much as I think people should be on the issues that we're dealing with in the legislature. And that's not anyone's fault. It's very difficult to follow along with what we're doing. You have a media that gives, very high level talking points on certain issues, again, mostly focused on the controversy of those issues and not necessarily focused on the areas of agreement. But I think it even goes further than that, and it goes to elections and how we endorse candidates in Minnesota to get to the general election. I think it's a problem on both sides, mostly on the Republican side, because the endorsement still means a lot on the Republican side, maybe not as much on the Democrat side. We've seen the last two governors elected on the Democrat side who weren't endorsed, and one in a primary. But to me, the solution is moving to a primary versus an endorsement. And what happens is you get a small group of people that are going to be either your ultra conservative folks or your ultra liberal folks. They go out to caucus night, cold night in February, and you have a small group of folks who really determine who the candidate is, the endorsed candidate is on the Republican side and the Democrat side. And it's not just that one night. They go that one night in February to get elected to become delegate. Then they have to go to another meeting to endorse the candidate. And what happens is you have such a small group of people that determine who that candidate is. And usually, more often than not, you get a really conservative candidate versus a really liberal candidate in the general election. And then you have to choose between one or the other. If we moved to more of a primary, I think more folks would have a voice in determining who the nominee is from each party. And therefore, you could get more, I don't want to say middle of the road candidates, but I will say more candidates who are willing to listen to folks on both sides.
If I can, Senator Kent, before I let you answer this, because what I'm getting from Senator Miller is the rest of us knuckleheads out here, we're always only getting, the spicy stuff. We're not getting deep enough into the issues. And then at the same time, and Senator, I'm not trying to put words in my mouth, at the same time, he wants those of us ill-informed folks to have a better opportunity to vote in the primaries to get our guy there when we have little or no, we're not as deeply embedded as those that are there. And I'm not saying anything you said was wrong, but what I'm hearing is those of us that aren't all that smart, aren't paying enough attention, we should have more chance to vote in these things. Are you with him? And I ask this only because Shannon brought up that endorsing candidates has come up at every multi-partisan social that they've had so far this year. This is something that a lot of people aren't talking about, but you guys seem to be onto something. Tell me where your thoughts are on this. Should we have more knuckleheads like Al having a bigger voice in how this works?
Well, I will say, I think I really do. When you watch the endorsing process, and it is a little different, governor versus these like state legislative races. And, keep in mind, a state senator represents about 80,000 people, 3 now, I think. And then half of that, 40 and change for a House member, right? So those are pretty smallish communities.
Mm-hmm.
But to get people, to get the word out for them, to get people to support them through that process is hard. And it often requires all day, like long days on a Saturday at a high school or something. And, folks with little kids can't do that, or folks with jobs on the weekends can't do that. It's really, it's not reflective of the greater population. And so there are some, these are these egghead things, it's a structural problem in our process, and the media doesn't help that. I mean, what's amazing to me is there's so much information available about the legislative process, but you have to have the time to wade through it. You have to go onto the website and start watching committee hearings yourself. And nobody has time for that. So, and as our media, more and more newspapers are shutting down. I'm in the eighth largest city in the state, and we don't have one. It's a real disconnect between who can get the information, what they do with it, and then how they use that, to advance their agenda by pushing candidates through that endorsing and elective process. And that's part of it. We don't have gerrymandering much here in Minnesota, which is a good thing, but that's part of the problem nationally too.
Well, to go back to the Purple Caucus, then we're 10 years down the road. I do not know this, Jeremy. Senator Miller, is the Purple Caucus still an entity?
It is not. After Senator Reiner retired, it sort of became less of a priority for folks on both sides of the aisle, and we tried to get it going a little bit more. There's another group called the Civility Caucus that's kind of stepped in and has tried to I think mimic or replicate what the Purple Caucus did. What I'll say is, even though the Purple Caucus isn't their meeting, I think you still have some of the folks that were attending those Purple Caucus meetings that still legislate in the Purple Caucus way. And even as I moved up through leadership roles, whether it was chairman of a committee or president of the Senate, majority leader, I always had the philosophy, and I continue to have the philosophy, you listen and work together with everyone, because just because someone has an R or a D after their name doesn't mean that their idea is any more or less important than anyone else's. And as I said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. The more you listen, the more you learn, and the better ideas you come up with. So while the Purple Caucus isn't still meeting today, there is another group that is trying to replicate that, but there are some of us that participated in the Purple Caucus that are still there, that are trying to work together. But I will say it is becoming harder and harder to work across the aisle, because it's politics is becoming more political, it's becoming more polarizing, and there are more forces outside the legislature, whether it's special interest groups, whether it's constituent groups back home, that do make it more difficult to try to work together. Some of us can continue to work through that. I'm one of those folks that's willing to do that. I'm willing to take on anyone as long as I feel it's in the best interest of the people, the state of Minnesota, but not everyone's willing to do that.
Let me ask you this, Senator Kent, because you were a part of it, and it has gone away now. I mean, maybe there's this civility caucus going on, trying to replicate it. but sounding like my dad and being an old man, this isn't the way it used to be. Politics isn't anymore. There is a left and a right, and then you've got a Shannon who wants this majority in the middle. Is she living a pipe dream in that we couldn't make the Purple Caucus? You're laughing at me. You know, I'm joking, but I don't. It went away. It was such a great idea. It was working so well, and it went away. And here we are today. How come?
How come we're here?
Well, can it work? Give me your ideas,
Yeah.
and then is this
Well,
majority in the middle of a thing, this Purple Caucus, could it come back?
Again, I go back to the fundamental premise of our country and our state. Those constitutions and the structures of our governments, you know, are aligned, and it is absolutely dependent on people working together with representing all the different communities they represent to come up with solutions. And so it's not okay to just say, I'm out, I'm done. I'm not going to even give it the effort. You know, I think we all, and you know, the value, I think, of an organization like this one and conversations like we're having today is to remind people, because we talk about, you know, the structural things that determine who actually makes it into the legislature, but then there are things we can do, like talking about Senator Rest's idea, you know, with bill authorship for, you know, how can we encourage, how can we create mechanisms, how can we have a Purple Caucus or a Civility Caucus? I was talking about, you know, when we were in the majority, and I think this had been the tradition a long time, we have assigned seats by seniority in committees, which forces me to sit next to David Syndrome, which was delightful. And surprisingly, I then sat next to David Osmek, which was also delightful, which can surprise some people. You know, so
those Republicans are fun people. They're fun to party with.
Absolutely. They're okay. I am not saying no to that. But there are things that can be done within the legislature, and that's some of the things that I think, you know, we can talk about. How can we facilitate those relationships and those connections just try to put it on the, you know, somewhere in the arena that we're going to try to work together.
I think Brett asked the next question, Senator Millard. I think this is one that's going to copy and put viral all over the place. So prepare yourself, because I love the fact he actually starts with, I do love this, by the way, don't take it wrong. I love the mission of majority in the middle. So this question is not challenging that mission. Now we get to it. I desperately seek middle candidates in either party that can change the landscape for our elections and governing. The reality is that the extremes are running the political machines on both sides, and they drown out the middle. Thus, the mission of majority in the middle, as I understand it. Will it take an independent to disrupt that current discourse? Can an independent win in today's political environment? Is the majority in the middle the start of a new independent party? That was my part. You, Senator Miller. That's when you endorse the independents, that's when they're going to jump on this, sir, and it's going to go viral. Just be ready for that.
Well, here in Minnesota, it's interesting because we've had independents win statewide before. Yeah. So I think nationally it would be very, very difficult for an independent to win, and that's perhaps where we would need it most. I give Dean Phillips credit on the Democrat side for stepping up and you know, putting his name out there, and while not an independent, certainly you know, a different type of thinking, a different mindset than what is there now at the presidential level. And that was highly controversial for him to do that. But I think it's going to take something similar to that here in Minnesota to try to get people working together. I always say when you have one party in control, I don't care what party it is, you lose your checks and balances. And we saw that. We saw some issues that came up this last year that because you had one party in control, you didn't get as much input as you may have otherwise if we would have had a split legislature or a governor of a different party than the legislature. So, and again, I say that it would happen on both sides, whether it's Republicans in control or Democrats in control. I always say it's really, really important to have those checks and balances and have the opportunity to listen to folks on both sides of the aisle. And we did not see much of that this last year. I think the right independent candidate could win statewide in Minnesota, and I think it would change the landscape of politics in Minnesota, or at least an independent thinking candidate, even if they ran on the R side or the D side. I think the right person could bring our state together, but it would definitely be an uphill challenge to do that. But I think it's possible, and frankly, I think it's needed here in Minnesota.
Senator Kent is going to take an independent to run the majority in the middle and take us to the promised land where we can all just get along.
I mean, I think in principle, that's a great idea. But I just think, again, it goes back to the structures we have in place, to succeed in our deeply entrenched two-party system right now, as a third-party candidate is just hard. And I was actually hopeful watching what was happening with the House in Washington, and the fact that the Republicans couldn't count to 217, that it might actually open the door for some sort of consensus approach to governing the House. But they found a different solution, so here we are. Every time we think we're going to get close, it kind of falls apart.
Some more rapid fire questions now. Some of the guests are throwing some out here quick, so with the time we have left. Quick question, yes or no? On the Republican side, Jeremy, does the major party caucuses still require an oath to the platforms to participate? On the Republicans and Democrats, do you have to pledge your oath to the platform?
I have no idea. I don't
Mark,
know.
That is a great question because I wouldn't know either.
I don't think so. But I honestly don't know.
So you at least got to know that. You at least have to know the
me.
DFL you have to know the DFL handshake to get into the door. So, I mean, there's the secret handshake. But after that, we don't know. Okay. Ranked choice voting.
Do you have to have an ID to get into those meetings? That's what I want to know. Just kidding.
See, you can't get a whole hour out of anybody. Ranked choice voting. Would this help with the majority in the middle? I'll start with you, Senator Kennedy. Can I have one more hot take before we run out of time?
I think the promise of that is interesting because there's motivations for people to not beat up on the other candidate as much and to campaign more positively, because if you want to be somebody's number two, you can't have been beaten up on number one. But I also, I want to study it more because we see it being used in pretty polarized situations, and I don't know that I feel like it's actually solving anything so far, but would love to see how that goes. I think it's an interesting idea.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there are 4 cities doing that in Minnesota now. I might be off a little bit on the numbers. Senator Miller, your thoughts on ranked choice voting? Could that get us more of a middle candidate?
I think ranked choice voting is a disaster. Full disclosure, I'm not an expert on it, but what the little bit I do know, I don't think it would be helpful. What I do think would be even more helpful is in Minnesota, there are spending limits on what the candidates can raise or spend. So if it's Jeremy Miller running against Susan Kent, we can each spend, say, $100,000 or somewhere thereabouts. But there are no limits on the special interest money, the outside money that comes in. And that's really where all the literature comes from. That's where the nasty, nasty campaigning comes in. Whether it's true or it doesn't even have to be true anymore. I can't even tell you how many pieces of literature that have been sent out either about me or others that like, hey, this isn't even accurate. So it doesn't have to be truthful. It doesn't have to be accurate. So I think the biggest thing we can change and the most positive outcome on Minnesota elections would be having a limit on the outside money that can be spent on candidates. And right now you say, well, you can't coordinate with the candidate, so the candidate doesn't know. Well, maybe you should be able to coordinate. Maybe you should put that on the candidates to have a little bit more control on what they can or can't put out there. And maybe it's the candidate can spend $100,000 and then you can have another $100,000 or $200,000 of outside money, but it could be equal on both sides. I think that would make the biggest positive impact on elections in Minnesota if we were able to somehow come up with a policy on how much outside money can be spent on candidates.
So
I want to
here,
go ahead.
Can I jump in
Yes.
on this one?
Sure.
We're having a real majority in the middle moment because I want to welcome Senator Miller to the End Citizens United train.
See, that's
And
the hot take. I was saying this is what that's going to go. It's going to
'cause
get
I
it put on the line.
I agree. But I will say, I just said as a matter of an anecdote, in 2020, when we were all running for reelection, I remember I was on NPR with then Majority Leader Paul Gazelka, who was real clear to say that Susan Kent did not support defunding the police. And meanwhile, I seem to recall a whole bunch of ads in my community that said that was the case, but never mind.
All right, one last hot take, and Paul, you and I got to go have a cigar sometime because I just love the way you think. He comes out of the box. He says it's going to take, quote unquote, a supermajority on one side or the other to de-escalate the polarizing political rhetoric. It's polarizing because the margins are so razor thin. Those that yell louder can pull a tiny fraction their way, and that can be enough to win. Thus, this whole who can yell the loudest thing. Paul, I hadn't thought this way. It might be genius. It might be evil genius. Your thoughts, is it going to take, and I'll start with Senator Kent, your team has all three sides. If you were to get a large enough majority, could that settle all this down?
I'd like to think so. And as we see a lot of the polling, we see a lot of the results from the elections around the country yesterday. Of course, it's an off year, which makes it weird. But, there are a lot of people and there are a lot of Republicans who, and I hear this a lot in my community, are a little fed up with the direction that the Republican Party has taken. And, they may not want to vote for Democrats, but they feel like they have to. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses, because I do think this is an important, critical time in our country. And we got to figure our way out of this, because this isn't sustainable.
Senator Miller, so to turn it to you, if Minnesota in this election just catches on and throws all three of the stool legs to you and the Republican Party, will you then bring down the rhetoric? Once you get it, would you be able to do that? Was that how that's all we need, is just the Republicans in charge of everything?
We would have a lot of work to do if that were the case. And I don't want to go on issue by issue, but we could be here all day. Some things that I think we would have to clean up. But what I will say is what I said a little bit earlier. I still think Minnesota is governed best when it's split and folks are there are checks and balances and folks are forced to work together. I think we get better outcomes when people are forced to work together, and we just didn't see that this last legislative session. So I do hope it gets better. And I don't think the state of Minnesota is going to go all the way the other way anytime soon. But hopefully we can restore some balance and restore those checks and balances so folks are forced to work together. Because right now it's very, very partisan, very, very polarizing. And it's a challenge for people to work together when there's one party in control.
We're getting out of time here. One last question each. I'm going to ask you to just do me the 30-second radio commercial version of this answer, if you would, so Shannon can wrap things up for us. What would you say to folks to get the new Purple Caucus back, and how would that correlate with the majority in the middle? Give us your speech on why we got to get back to that kind of concept. Senator Kent?
I think we absolutely should. I think it is worth trying. I think if you can get a handful of legislators together to do that, I think it's absolutely worth it. And I think it's really good to have one of the original founders hopefully back me up on that one.
Senator Miller, your thoughts on how do we get the Purple Caucus back? Does it need to be something else? And how does it tie together with majority in the middle?
Well, absolutely. I think it would be helpful. And I think we go back to the original reason why the Purple Caucus was formed, and that is to really to get to know each other and build those relationships, because I think now more than ever, having those relationships on both sides of the aisle is critically important. And I think it would go a long ways in helping improve the current situation, the current highly partisan, highly polarized situation we have right now in politics here in Minnesota and really across the country.
All right, I thank both of you for playing along with us today. I want to thank the audience for great questions, and I'm going to throw it back to you, Shannon, as I ran a little over time.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I'm generally a very positive person. I think I have to be to do this work. And it is discussions like this, like I get to bask in the way it should be for an hour. So that has been a gift to me, and I know it's been a gift to our audience. So thank you all three for joining in. With that, audience members, thank you so much. Like I mentioned at the top, this is being recorded, and we're going to put it on our YouTube channel pretty soon. I don't do the video editing, so I'm sort of at the mercy of our volunteer. So we'll send that out when it gets put up on YouTube. We have one last in-person event scheduled for 2023, which is a members only event in person, Wednesday, December 6th. For that event, our special guest speaker is Professor David Schultz. And so if you're already a member of Majority in the Middle, watch your email because you'll be able to get tickets to that event soon. And if you're not a member yet, you should be. So go to our website and sign up. I think that's all I have. Thank you all again so much for your time and for doing what we wanted to see. So thank you so much.